Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. You're looking at the 5-minute chart, and I wanted to point out a new type of pattern that we're beginning to enter into here. There's a lot of lines drawn, so I don't want it to be confusing, but really we're just looking at a series of stair-step advances, and that's a normal situation in a bull market. You have flag formations that break out or cup formations that break out. Clearly here we have a pretty obvious flag that broke, and of course the most bullish flag is a rising flag as opposed to a descending flag or something like that. We have another rising flag here. This one's more of a cup, and this one is more of a cup. So we're still rising in this stair-step advance. Now I've drawn some other lines here. Specifically, I've drawn a trend line on the MACD. And the reason I drew this is to point out that the MACD reset, you always want to watch the MACD to see if it resets to a new low with a lack of corresponding price. So on this one in particular, you can see we completely reset to below the zero line on the MACD right here, which corresponds to roughly here. And you can see that this MACD reset occurred at near the low of this, but with the rally back to the high of where the MACD started, you can see we're not anywhere near that high. So we have a strongly descending MACD but a recovering price. That's consistent with the type of stair-step movement we're seeing. So we want to pull out farther to the daily to take a look at what seems to be forming a interesting kind of cup formation. You had something like that here, although on a much smaller scale. You can clearly see the cup. This seems to be a much larger cup that we're forming here. And will that portend a much more violent price move to the high side? I'm not sure. It may. Based on the strength and the fundamentals of the debt negotiations that obviously resulted in a complete failure for the fiscal conservatives, whatever your reasons are for understanding why the fiscal conservatives that are supposedly in the Republican Party and the fiscal liberals that are in the Democrat, however that breaks down, that's up to you to decide. But the result from yesterday was clearly a defeat of fiscal conservatism. Pretty much the consensus was that we need to keep going on the path that we're on. So the only question is, will silver respond to that type of decision to print money and rally? And I think it will. So let's pull back a little bit and look at this type of cup that we're starting to form here. Now you can see that we reset on this MACD almost to the zero line on the 8-hour chart, and we're really set up for a good rally, one that would take us to this line here. We'd have to break above and maybe get to the 45 level, something like that. If you remember, I talked about the resistance points that I had identified before, and the first resistance point that I identified was this level here, around 40 and 39, and I said we need to work our way through that price area before we get to new highs. Actually, that was the second one identified. The first one was this one in here. So you can see we clearly broke through it and then tested it and now we're rallying higher. So this consolidation point, and we want to actually pull up some volume. This consolidation point around the 39.40 area and the one down below here and here, those have pretty much been decisively broken, and as I pointed out, this strong support volume that we've been tracking that came in during the May crash, I said if we supersede these lows and go down, then this volume that came in here is turned into selling volume. On the other side, if we test these lows and rally, then this becomes buying volume. So actually all of this volume now has turned to buying volume. So the sell-off was severe, but the buyers that came in on the sells overpowered the power of the sellers, and we're rallying now. So we're just finishing up with this last area of resistance, and it's just resistance because the number of times the price traded in this area. We have a nice area that the price traded back and forth for a good week or so, and we're just fighting through this. And if we get to the next area, which is roughly topped at about 43 and a half, then our next level of resistance is going to be this consolidation area right in here. So our next level of resistance is going to be right at about, we'll call this 45 and a half. This is our next level we need to get through if we're going to form this cup and blast off to the upside, which I fully expect, based solely on fundamentals. Again, technicals are just the way you get information about how to enter position. You have to already have a conviction about what position you're going to enter into, or the technicals really don't tell you anything, because there are so many technical traders in the market. You have millions on one side, millions on the other. You have to already have a conviction of where the price is going to go. Once you have that conviction, then you will use the technicals to determine buy and sell points. Obviously, in a bull market, it's buy points. So we're looking for buy points. You may want to buy breakouts. I prefer to buy dips as we rise in this bull market. I initially, as I pointed out in past videos, I initially bought the breakouts like here and here, but since I'm convinced of the fundamentals, I've been recommending the dips. So that's up to you how you decide to buy, but clearly we are approaching some resistance in the 44 to 45 area, and we want to see how the market takes care of itself. We've got a nice reset of the MACD, so I'm pretty confident that we're going to reach 45 probably in the next few days, so we'll just leave that as it is. Now, I wanted to address some issues that have come up. I'm reluctant to address these issues because, as you know, if you follow my channel, I've broken out my channels to a number of topics. When I first came across the Bitcoin issue, I was very enthused about it, and I addressed it a couple of videos, and obviously there was a lot of opposition from people who don't believe in it, and I'm not going to go back and debate that. That's up to people to make up their own minds. But I broke out that topic to a new channel. And I also have a channel that I've broken out that's also about similar issues, but it's conspiracy based because I didn't want to go into other conspiracies that don't have to do with silver, because this is a silver channel. But I need to address some of the comments that have been coming up. There have been a number of videos posted by gold bugs, silver bugs, and a lot of the issues that have come up have been having to do with the Rothschild family, the quote-unquote Jewish banker conspiracy. A lot of these conspiracies, these are comments that are coming up in my videos. I'm not going to censor the comments because I think the comment section is, I believe in free speech, I believe in the free and open marketplace of ideas, so I'm not going to censor comments based upon their content. I will censor comments, and as you know, I think you know, I ban very few people, I think 2 or less from my channel, and that has to do with spamming and profanity and things like that. But if it's a debate about the issues, I'm not going to censor topics. But a lot of the debate has turned towards the conspiracy side. I have a channel for that. I haven't had the time to update it, but if you want to look at that channel, you can get an idea of how my opinions are on that issue. But I wanted to address really quick the amount of comments that are coming in that I would say tend to the anti-Semitic side. Now, I'm not, a lot of people who know my channel know it's a channel by a Christian. It's not a Christian channel, but I'm a Christian and my views are swayed by that, obviously. This is just market analysis, but those are my views. So I wanted to address really quickly, just briefly, this topic that comes up so frequently. And I wanted to take you to an explanation that is something that is used against quote-unquote conspiracy theorists all the time. And this is the idea of Occam's razor. Now, a lot of you are familiar with Occam's razor. I'll give the Wikipedia definition real quick here and go down to a summary. Occam's razor, often expressed in Latin as lex parsimony, translating to law of parsimony, law of economy, or law of succinctness, is a principle that generally recommends, when faced with competing hypotheses that are equal in other respects, selecting the one that makes the fewest new assumptions. Now let's summarize that. You can find that summarized, and the summary explanation is this: the simplest explanation is most likely the correct one. So that's I won't say it's a scientific principle, but it's a principle of logic, we'll say, or perhaps a principle of the philosophy of science, or let's say the philosophy of knowledge. Now, this argument is actually one that's used quite frequently against conspiracy theorists, and obviously a lot of people in the silver community are conspiracy theorists. I'm not going to argue the conspiracy facts or figures because I have another channel for that, so that's what that channel is about. But I will say that one observation that I would make, and I want you to think about, is this. What I'm proposing is that if you are a conspiracy theorist, then you do not subscribe to Occam's razor. You actually subscribe to something that I will call reverse Occam's razor. Not that the most complex explanation is the best, but that it's most likely, if there is a situation of a conspiracy, that the proffered explanation will most likely not be true, and the least proffered explanation is more likely to be true. So let's bring that back to the conspiracy theory about the bankers and what many have mentioned, the Rothschilds, and some have mentioned the Vatican, and some have mentioned the Freemasons, and some have mentioned it goes on and on and on. The principle that I would offer is, if you are a devotee of conspiracy theories, then you believe that a powerful group of people control everything. So this is my proposal. If you honestly believe that this very powerful group of people control virtually everything, would you not also believe that that very powerful group of people had the power to keep their name from being proffered as the group of very powerful people who control everything? So I want you to think about that, and I want you to think about all of the people who are proposed to be the people who are behind all the things that you see. And my suggestion is that if you buy into the explanation that such and such group is behind all of this, and you find a tremendous amount of agreement out there on the internet, in Google, in the public, that yes, indeed, this group is behind this, I would suggest, according to this reverse Occam's razor principle, that that group, by definition, is not as powerful as you are proposing that it is, or it would be able to keep its name from being attached to the conspiracy that it's supposedly committing. So I'll leave it at that. I want you to think about that, and I want you to think about the groups that aren't mentioned, and perhaps you might think that they may have more power than the groups that are so commonly mentioned, that are so easily blamed for these things. So again, I'm just going to address that in regards to the comments and some anti-Semitism, some anti-Catholicism, some anti-Masonry. I just want you to think about that in terms of who really has the power. I have an opinion. It's not for this channel, and if you want to explore that, you can look at my other channels. So the next thing I want to look at is the supply and demand situation for this metal. Now, I've shared that I believe that we are going to see, I've come recently to the conclusion that we're probably going to see triple-digit silver this year. This reaction that we're seeing right here to the budget deal is, in my opinion, a confirmation that the deal they reached is to print to infinity. I said yesterday that they're probably going to have to announce a QE, another QE, because they've already agreed to add $2 trillion plus to the debt. Who's going to buy it? They're going to have to come up with the buyers next, and that's going to have to be the Fed, because no one else is interested in buying. But I wanted to segue into this brief analysis of supply and demand, because ultimately you're not going to be buying silver because of the technicals. If you were buying or selling on the technicals, you would have been washed out. Now, I think if you follow my channel, you know that I did recommend silver when it first hit about 44. I recommended and bought myself at about 40, and I strongly recommended a lot of buys at 32 and 33 and 34. I did not recommend selling, I recommended adding. So my question to the silver bears who came out around May 1st is, and I know Street Money 21 has recently made an excellent call and gotten back in. I don't know about the rest, to tell you the truth. I really don't follow their channels, so you can tell me. But are you back in silver now? Are you long again? And when did you get long? Because we're getting near 42. My projection is 45, and we're running out of time to get back long in this market. So let's jump over to the supply-demand analysis that I did real quickly here. And it's not real deep. It's just some ideas that I'm throwing around. And I wanted to examine the basic concepts of a glut and a shortage in whatever it is, any commodity or investment that you can think of. So let's look at a glut first. A glut is a situation where you have a very high supply of whatever it is. And the reason that you have that glut is, and you have that high supply, is because you had too high of a price. And what that too high of a price caused was a malinvestment because a large number of producers rushed in to produce this thing that had a very high price, which ultimately created a high supply. And the primary reason you get that too high of a price is because you used borrowed money. For whatever the reason was, the money was borrowed at a very low interest rate, or it was borrowed because the borrowers didn't have great credit, but it was given to them anyway. And ultimately, this situation is going to result in a crash. Now, another situation is a situation where you have a shortage. This is an instance where you have very high demand, but the price does not respond. For whatever reason, it might be because the price is suppressed, it might be because the supply is manipulated or put into a bottleneck. And in this situation, you have a borrowed asset. You actually have rather than the money to buy it is borrowed, the asset itself is borrowed and is sold, and that causes too low of a price. And the ultimate result of that market is going to be a breakout in price because, as we know, supply and demand will ultimately win out. So I'm going to type in the things that I have in mind here, and I think you'll see that it's pretty clear that you could have guessed the things I'm talking about. The thing that we have a glut of, because we have too high a supply of, because we had too high of a price that came from borrowed money that resulted in a crash, is housing. The thing that we have a shortage of, because we have very high demand but the price is too low and the asset is being borrowed and sold at too low a price and is starting to break out, is silver. So that's a simple supply-demand analysis, and I think you can tell what you need to sell and what you need to buy by that analysis. And we'll talk to you next time.